theyeshiva.net.
.123. The middle of the page, the line starts, K'maimer Reb Chanina ben Doisa, Misha Amar L'Shemen V'yad L'Chuli. Mamish in the middle of the page. The next line, V'zeu Inyan Atfila. Yes. How Nachem Ish Gamzu did it.
No, his question is if it's good, why do you need a shtamas?
That was his question. No. That was your question. I thought your question was how to do Hishtamas. That's a good question. Both are good questions. You're asking if it's so good, who needs to change it, right? When do you have to change it? It's so good. It's a great question, and the question really should be stronger. Why would somebody who really accepts this and embraces this, the whole davening should be changed? Rifa'ini Hashem v'nei rafei, right? Toshienu v'nei v'sheya. Oh, it's wonderful. And if it's not wonderful, it's even more wonderful. And if it's really bad, it means it's like, wow! Come on, bring it on more. Amachaya. V'shmak leinu, with re'ena v'anyenu, with barich aleinu. What's the issue?
So how does it match with the other trachut that's angry?
Right.
According to that, you shouldn't say the fire.
Exactly.
I am healthy.
Okay, oich. You're telling me it's Tov Ma'od. Tov Ma'od, great. What do you want to change Tov Ma'od? Unless you don't really believe it. You don't think so. So you say, do me a favor, get rid of the bad, give me good. Right, that's the shaila. So if somebody doesn't take it seriously, okay. You could say for a person who doesn't believe it, or doesn't see it this way, or can't relate to it, say, listen, maybe it's true, maybe it's not true, I'm not interested in it. Chvil Tov, I don't need Ma'od. Right? Like some mothers would say, do me a favor, don't give me children who are too smart, too brilliant, too talented. Give me simple kids. Nicht zu klug. Not too talented, not too creative. Just give me simple. And you can understand. But the Baal HaTanya himself also davened in Nusach HaTfilah. He davened in Nusach. He wrote a siddur. From 16 Uschayis, he wrote a siddur. Same siddur, the same Shemoneh Esrei. How do you justify, how do you explain it? That's a wonderful question. So the question will become very clear as we continue. I just want to bring out, I didn't understand that was your question. And then there's a second question about Ishtamas. Yes, we'll see. It's gonna all be Bavaran. I think it'll all be clarified. He now comes back to the theme in the beginning of the Maimah with Tefillah. V'zeu inyan atfilah. The Baal HaTanya began and said that we have to be choike Yeridas Neshama b'olam hazeh, that the main tachlis of the Yeridas Neshama was dveikus, to connect with its creator, ba'ava v'yir, and the main dveikus is in davening. That's the main moment when the Neshama cleaves to its creator. Certainly before birth and after death, there's much deeper connection. You can't compare the dveikus then, dveikus in the body, because the whole love and awe that the neshama experiences before birth or after death is far deeper than the ava and yira that the neshama can experience in the body, because the body ultimately remains a shell that conceals the true soul, and it doesn't really always allow avodas Hashem. Not only that, it schleps the neshama down to enjoy materialistic pursuits which are completely irrelevant to the soul. But since you're living in the body, you basically have no choice. The body tells the soul, this is it, we're going to enjoy ourselves, we're going to live it up. The body says, here is a good meal and all your problems will go away. And the soul is forced to indulge in it because the body is tempted by it. And then the soul just goes back to its old void afterwards. But that's this journey of the soul. So if somebody is not aware of their soul, it's not an issue. They may feel the pain on an unconscious level. They may feel the pain but not know why they're feeling it. People feel a certain emptiness in life, but they don't know how to identify what it is, where it's coming from, and most importantly, how to resolve it. But there is always that inner voice of the soul. It's a kol d'mama daka. It's a silent inner voice of the neshama that a person has. And let's understand that even within religious circles, this void continues, because religion is not always associated with spirituality or with godliness. A person could do religious things, but they don't have any relationship with it. On the contrary, the more they do it, the more they may be alienated from it. So even though there's tremendous value in just the maisa, but nonetheless the soul sometimes is still starving. So that means that the neshama in this world goes through a very heavy journey, and it could never see what it sees before it comes into the body or after it leaves the body. It's a whole different experience. In fact, we don't even have oisis for it. The Rambam writes in his commentary to Mishnayos about Olam Haba, about Gan Eden, he says, describing Gan Eden is like describing to a person who was born blind different colors. It's not pshat you don't have the oisis. Explain it better. It's even hard for us to understand the mashal. Person simply red, blue, green. Somebody who saw and then became blind, you know what it is. But somebody who never saw it, the concept doesn't exist. We don't even appreciate the concept because all of our vision in life, our sensitivity in life is always channeled through the prism of the body. But the truth is, the moment the neshama leaves the body, or before the neshama comes into the body, everything is different. It's like from one extreme to another extreme, to a point that it's incomprehensible for the person what the neshama experiences and sees the moment after it passes. Suddenly nothing is blocked. Nothing is eclipsed. The whole world is one. And Gashmis doesn't block the Ruchnis. So he says you can't compare the dvekus of the neshama before or after the dvekus that the neshama is capable in the guf. But here is where it comes. Here is where the point comes that the Zohar says that the tachlis of the neshama down here is to transform miriru lemiska, bitterness into sweetness, darkness into light. The whole person was created for this, and he started to say that means that our dvekus here and our tefillah here has to do with transformation. And that doesn't exist before the neshama is born or after its passing. And then he begins the whole process that in Bayis Rishon there was b'chlal no davening, and in Bayis Sheni there was a short davening. Today is a longer davening, and from this he went into the subject that all dinim are sweetened in the shayrish, and he went off to the whole concept that we've been discussing the last few days of Toiv Zamalach HaChayim and Toiv Moed Zamalach HaMavos. So now he comes back to tefillah. So he says, "V'zeh when you're not tefillah shebegufa adam b'olam hazeh." Now we come back to the concept of tefillah, which exists when the soul is in the body in this world. Asana Shama b'teich haguf seivelas tzaros v'yisurim. The soul within the body experiences, endures tzaros, challenges, and yisurim pain. Not because of the various pains a person has in life, that's something else. But here he's talking about existence is painful. Why? The neshama has one craving, one yearning, one mission, nothing else. It wants to have dvekus in its creator. It wants to have intimacy with its creator. That's what its agenda is. It has no other agenda besides wanting to be one with one. It's not interested in anything else. That's what it is. It is a chelik elikami mal, and it wants to be part of a likami mal. It doesn't only want to be a chelik separated, it wants to be completely one, complete vekus. That is its yearning, like a lover who loves somebody, and all he or she could think about is, the Rambam says this in Hilchos Tshuva Perek Yud, somebody, he says, has this vision about somebody that they love, and the Rambam says, Ba'avasa tishge tamid, all day and all night, he or she thinks about nothing else but this relationship. Now sometimes it's not exactly a healthy situation. A person is infatuated by some type of crush because they have a void. But the Rambam just gives a mashal to understand when somebody really, really loves somebody without hesach hadas. You can't even take your mind away from it. It's 24/7, non-stop, and you don't sober up from it because it's real. In this case, it's real. This is what the neshama wants. It wants one thing. It wants dveikus in Hashem. That's what it wants. It wants to be completely one. That's what the neshama wants. However, haguf eine manicha. The body has a completely different perspective. The guf doesn't allow it. What says the guf doesn't allow it? The guf doesn't even know about it. Like the guf doesn't even understand the language. So it's two people communicating. They're married to each other. They live together their whole life. And it's not like in a marriage where you could separate. You can go away from the house a few hours and go pursue your dreams. Here the neshama and the guf are always one. You can't have a soul without a body. You can't have a body without a soul. They're not just married to each other. They're completely integrated for life. And it's completely two different perspectives. The guf doesn't even know what the neshama is talking about. The neshama doesn't know what the guf is talking about. The neshama. So the neshama, he says, the existence for the soul is a very painful reality. And if a person can't identify this pain, ultimately they can't find meaning in any other pain. All other pains in life pale in comparison to this. This pain is at the core of existence. This is not because I'm having a problem with this. Those are all details. Every person has problems. Every person has challenges. Every person has nisyonos. No life is perfect. But this is at the core. This is even the greatest, most blessed life, which everybody should have. This tension that exists in existence, nobody can transcend. Nobody can make believe it doesn't exist. There is a marriage of a paradox in every person. And that paradox drives us crazy. We repress it. Some people repress it with television. Some people repress it with shopping. Some people repress it with barbecues. Some people repress it with iPhones, with a lot of coffee, or with other stuff, more benign or less benign, more destructive or less destructive. But if you're opened up to it without any distractions, existence by definition is painful. What is the pain? The first pain is not because of anybody doing anything bad to you. That's stage 2. It's the fact that you have two opposite realities that are brought together for life. And they do everything together. They shower together, they eat together. They sleep together, they hike together. They go to work together, they daven together. They learn together, they think together. No one is on their own.
So they're not together, there's no more life.
Right. A soul without a body is not a life, and a body without a soul is lifeless. Before birth, they weren't together. After death, they won't be together. But for this journey, they're together, and they're completely different. The body is physical, and it knows about physicality. The soul, essentially, is a piece of God. It's a chelik alakamimal. So the soul sees the world from divine perspective. The soul sees the world like Hashem sees the world. The soul experiences life from a divine perspective, and that's what it yearns. It yearns to be one with its true self, with its true identity. And the guf is like, what are you talking about? Was Hakstat Shainik? Who decided all of this? And the soul starts doubting itself. Right? So the soul says, you know what, let me try. At least we think the soul is doubting itself. It's not really doubting itself. So the body says, let's try this, let's try this. And the soul says, okay, let's try. They try and try and try and try and try. And 30 years later, 40 years later, 50 years later, the void still persists. It's a very deep void. That's the tsaris he's talking about it. Everything else is a later stage. People go through this, people go through that. But this is not what you go through. This is existence itself. Existence itself has a very powerful, painful component to it. This shidduch, the human condition, inherent to the human condition. And if a person doesn't acknowledge this, they won't be able to get anywhere, because they'll always be dealing with symptoms. It's like you have this symptom, that symptom. So you, right, in camp, we had a camp I went to, we had a nurse. So for everything, she had the same troop. It was called a lassenger. Everything was a lassenger. I'm having a heart attack, take a lassenger. I have a migraine headache, everything. An infection on the foot. Everything was a candy, okay? But even if somebody can deal with symptoms, if they don't deal with core issues, they're not going to be dealing with anything. So a person deals with this and takes care of that and takes care of that. It's all good. But if I don't address the core issue that my soul is crying, my soul is yearning, my soul is not being nurtured, ultimately I won't be able to deal with anything. But for this, you have to know what your soul is. You have to be able to listen to it. You have to be able to identify it. And nobody can do this for you. And this is very, very internal. It's very, very authentic. It's not about the community. It's not even about family. It's not about social pressure. It's really if your own neshama is home. If your own soul is home with itself, or it's in galus, or it's in exile.
Why is it painful?
Why is it painful? Why is it painful for the soul not to be who it is? I think it would be compared to a, you'll take a person, right? And I'll give you an example. The world has different levels of creation. You have Daimim, you have Tzemeach, you have Chayin, you have Medaber. For everyone, self-expression means something else completely. Come to a tree or a bush or a plant, and ask the tree, tell the tree or the bush or the plant or the flower, I want you to express yourself. I want you to be free. Okay? So basically here you're never attached to the earth. One place, it's so boring. I'm going to free you. I'll cut you, and then you'll be able to roam the world, be able to travel the world. You get on an airplane, you travel to Berlin, you travel to Moscow, to Sydney, to Tel Aviv, right? And the tree says thank you very much, but no thank you. Now take an animal, take a wonderful horse, or a cow, or a bull, or a sheep, or a goat, and you see that tree? I'm going to give you everything that tree has. I'm going to tie you down to the earth, and I'll pour water in you, and I'll give you sunlight. It's the greatest torture for an animal. What is life for the tree is death for the animal. But you give the animal a farm, a field, yeah? The goat, pashat a ganze Tag. He goes from this stack of hay to this stack of hay to this pile of grass to this pile of grass. Sits down here, walks there. I'm a chaya. There's a guy here on Spook Rock. He has a farm. So I go there sometimes with my kids. So he has 3 goats with birds, with chickens galore, with rabbits, ducks, turkeys, and different types of animals. And I say, "Nu, how are they doing?" He says, "It's paradise for them. My wife loves them. They walk around, they graze, they're free, nobody bothers them. I'm a chaya." Yeah? Now take a person and say, "I'm going to take care of you just like I take care of this horse." And you put the person in what they call it, a corral, right, fenced around, and you put grass, and he could walk around there a whole day. It's a death sentence for the person.
Prison.
It's a prison. That's what a prison is. They did this to people.
Isn't that what some sects do to their communities?
I had to go there.
So the person is screaming, "Kill me! Katzti b'chai." What did Rivka say? Katzti b'chai. I don't want such a life. Why? Okay, you don't want? I'll make you like a tree. We'll tie you up to the ground. We'll tie you up to the earth. The answer is, if you're a tree, you're right. For a tree, the greatest form of life is that it remains in one spot for 3,000 years. You have trees that are around for thousands of years. That's its greatest life. That's its greatest form of self-expression. It grows tall, it's beautiful, it's blended, and it's connected to its roots. You do that to an animal, it's tsar balachayim midaraisa, it's torture. But you give an animal the freedom to roam, the freedom to eat. You're not torturing it, you're not repressing it, you're not crushing it. Amachaya, azav tazavim. You take a person and you say, "I'm going to treat you the same way." The worst punishment you can do to a person. For a day it's nice, yeah. For 3 days it's nice. For a week it's nice. Afterwards, you want to kill yourself. Why? Because a human being has certain qualities and characteristics that need self-expression. Whatever those qualities may be, but they're human. Relationships with people, wisdom, right? Work, connections, and so forth, attachments. Creation, productivity, various talents. And that itself, every person is different. So what is free, and then you have doimim, you have a rock. Yeah, that's one of them. Leave it alone, I'm a chaya. You have a lake, you have a beach, you have earth. What is free for the doimim is not freedom for the tzemeach. What is freedom for the tzemeach is the opposite of what's free for the chai. You cut him off and you want him to roam, he's dead. You tie up the chai, he's dead. And what is free for the chai is not free for the medaber. Freedom is not what you do, it's what you don't do. It's how much your life expresses who you are. Now taking a human being himself, you could take a human being, right? and let him eat, and let him drink, and let him roam, and let him produce. But you don't nurture the divine in the human being, the neshama in the human being. That's a horrible form of pain. That's a horrible form of distress. And the fact that the person is conscious of what's going on or not, that doesn't make it less painful. A person may not be aware, which only makes it more painful, because the person is not even in touch with it. That's what he's saying. Not because anybody abused you, because this is the story of the human condition, it's the story of existence.
If it's such a paradox, neshama from the gift, then why, if the gift is at home and not the neshama, then he has such a void?
Excellent question. And finish.
And when the neshama is home and not the gift, why is
Sucks good. This is a Gitta Shaila. This is a Gitta Shaila. He says it's not fear. What's the solution to this tension? Why is it always in one way, one direction? Yeah, why is it that if the neshama wins, there will be menuchas hanefesh? And if the guf wins, there won't be menuchas hanefesh. If the neshama is happy, the guf should be forever frustrated. Just like if the guf is happy, the neshama should forever be frustrated.
But the neshama
is the source.
Yeah.
Oh, because the guf, that's the whole point of this maimer. The guf is really ein hadinim nimtakim ela b'sharsham. The guf is not really an enemy of the neshama. The guf's healing comes when you align it with the soul. It can't happen the other way. Menuchas hanefesh can't happen if the neshama becomes like the guf. But if the guf is aligned with the neshama, there'll be menuchas hanefesh, because that's the truth of the guf. I'll give you an example.
There's no paradox.
There's no real paradox. There is. You first have to acknowledge that there is. If you right away go that there's no, then there will be. You know what I mean? It's like a married couple that says there's no differences between us. It's perfect. Then it's going to be bad, because it's going to emerge, right, but not consciously, and it's going to take you over. You first have to acknowledge the problem in order to realize that there's no problem. This is a mistake that a lot of people make in their own life. They don't want to deal with the fact that there's a challenge to deal with, because it's sepasnisht. Oh, I don't care about these things. I'm not a 2-year-old baby. You are a 2-year-old baby. If you can acknowledge that you're a 2-year-old baby, then you won't be a 2-year-old. If you can't acknowledge it, you will actually be a 2-year-old. You understand what I'm saying? If there's no paradox, there's going to be a paradox. If there's a paradox, then there can be no paradox. So let's say a person has a dog, right? And he's walking his dog. So Kedar come, the dog jumps into a beautiful garbage dump, a garbage can. Because there's excellent food, leftovers from the bar mitzvah, everything from the smorgasbord was there. And he's sucking on the bone. And the master says, come. Dog looks sich nicht von art, such a smorgasbord. Lav b'chol yoyim misrachish nisa. Not every day do you have such food in the garbage can. Come. And he's screaming at the dog. He wants to be with his dog. So what is the solution? Is the solution that he should also go into the garbage can and stay there and eat together with the dog, and he'll be together with the dog? That's not what he does. He summons the dog until he gets the dog to come. Sometimes begrudgingly, he has no choice, or willingly. You understand? The neshama is never going to go into the garbage dump. It just won't. He can't. He's a prince. He's a piece of God. He can't be not divine. So what's the solution for the tension in life? It's never the neshama following the body. It's never going to help, because the soul will never go that way. But the other way, the guf will follow the soul. Maybe initially begrudgingly, and then willingly, and then eagerly. That depends which state you are. Begrudgingly, willingly, or eagerly. But that's the only solution. The solution for peace in the house is not that the master goes wherever the dog goes. It's that the dog follows the master. And when the master doesn't teach the dog who's the boss, oy va'avoy, it's not good.
The neshama does go there, because otherwise, who gives you the energy to go there?
That's true. But I mean, ultimately, the source of menuchas, yes, settle. The source of menuchas hanefesh, to get rid of the tension, is only in a controlled life. When there's agbaras hatzura ala chaimer. When the chaimer is aligned with the tzura, not when the tzura surrenders to the chaimer. That's not going to work. It's been tried for thousands of years. People try it. People try it all the time. They say, let the physical rule, and that's it.
They're not happy, there's no happy people.
I'm not going to tell you that there's no happy people. I don't know that. I don't know how to. What do you mean happy people? I mean, there's a lot of distractions in life. Baruch Hashem, there are TVs that have 800 channels.
800.
There's more than that. Oh, okay, I didn't know.
There's a difference between happiness and meaning.
Right. There's also fun. You can have fun. You can have a lot of distractions.
Can be fulfilled. Can be happy.
But then there's an element of fulfillment, of meaning. You can't you can't fake it. You could fake it, but it's not going to help. It's not.
A goy doesn't have it as strong as a yid. You said the share. A goy says everything's perfect.
Yeah. Every person has an neshama and a guf, but it depends what type of soul, what type of body.
What level, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Jews have this in a much more acute fashion because of the nature of their neshama. So they need much more of this meaning, of this transcendence in order to be able to survive. You can't not be in touch with your neshama at all because it's there. But sometimes it's repressed. You don't know what it is. But once in a while the person will suddenly start crying. Or the person will suddenly experience a moment of awe, or a moment of reverence, or a moment of meaning. These are very, very deep internal and personal experiences. Huh? Or the opposite, depression, yeah. And sometimes addiction is completely that. It's the pain is so profound the person has to numb it. They just can't live with themselves. Why can't they live with themselves? They can't stand in the world, look in the mirror and just live with what is. They can't. The void is so powerful. Why is it so powerful? Just eat, sleep, and get a job. What's the problem? The problem is that they usually have a deep soul. And if the soul is not being nurtured, it's not getting oxygen, it goes crazy. It's like a person doesn't eat for a day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days. You get very grouchy and you get into a very bad mood. What happens when you don't feed the soul? It also gets very grouchy. It gets into a very bad mood. It's a different type of bad mood. You don't eat, you get into a bad mood after a while. So a day, fine, 2 days, 4 days, 7 days. Even if you're drinking and you're surviving. You plots, you explode, you implode, yeah? You lose it right away. You lose it. You know when men come home at night and they're hungry? I always tell them, go to a restaurant before you come home. Your wife's dinner will be seconds. And that way if she didn't make dinner, it'll be fine. Because you ate already. They lose it. They just snap. People snap. So when the neshama is very hungry, it snaps in its own way. The more a person is sensitive, the deeper the soul they have, the more it needs. The more it needs transcendence, the more it yearns for it when it doesn't have it. The more it's deprived, the more tsaris and yisurim it has. It has to be fed. It needs. I once gave an example, if you remember. Imagine Mozart would have grown up in a home without a piano. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart was a genius of music. Thank God he grew up in a home with a piano. If he would have grown up in a home without a piano, the genius would have been there. The creativity would have been there. The energy would have been there, but there was no outlet for it. So what would happen? Tremendous frustration. Breaking windows would be the good thing. You have it with a lot of kids. You have it with a lot of young people. They're little Mozarts in their own way, but nobody gives them a piano. So there's a tremendous pain or anxiety, and it needs an outlet. It needs to come out. It comes out in all different types of ways, fascinating ways. The Gemara says, "Al tigui b'mashiachai, elu tinoikus shel beis rabba." Don't touch my Mashiachs. These are little kids. Every little kid, especially every little Jewish kid, yeah, is like a little Mashiach in his own mind. He feels like he could change the world. He wants to change the world, especially if you have a Jewish mother. So either you are Mashiach or you're going to bring Mashiach, but you're not a small person. And then as we grow up, we're told to calm down, just live a life of quiet desperation and just be quiet. Go to yeshiva, let's not hear from you for a few years. let's marry you off and just become an accountant or whatever it is, or do this, do that. Now, nothing wrong. That's a wonderful thing. It's better than some other stuff people do. But very often we're told just do, stay, follow the system. That's the main thing. Don't stick out. Don't stick out. So for some people it works wonders. For other people, their neshamas are raging. So there's different outlets. They don't have a piano, there's different outlets. So you have to understand what a soul is. You can't destroy people's inner Mashiachs. Can't do that. Some of us are good at it. We become very cynical. But the soul is very powerful. It needs its outlet. So a person has to identify it and tune into it.
Does the Mozart necessarily know that it's connected to God?
On some level, the soul knows that it's connected, but how conscious that is in our conscious body, that's a question of each individual. So there is that connection that's always there. It can't not be connected. That's what it is. It's a chelik elakamimal. But how aware I am of it is a whole different experience. I may not be aware of it. Somebody once said, right, by Jewish mothers, if you have a good kid, a doctor. A slow kid, a lawyer. If he's really underdeveloped, an accountant. Mamash Amashugana, a rabbi. But there's no, that's it. You got to produce. Now that's all good stuff. But the most important thing is to feed the soul. The person got to feed the soul. So he says, "B'meila u'kamoygolus hashchina, shemuchrachas lahachis gamar rishoyim." This is fascinating. The neshama in the guf is mamash like a golus hashchina. It's like the Shechina itself has to give life to everything. That's what God wants. He gives life to everything. So you have a Rasha, somebody who's not exactly the most righteous person, and everything in his life is being used against goodness, and the chiyus to do that comes from goodness. So the Shechina is giving life to that which its whole identity opposes the Shechina. And that itself comes from the Shechina. That's what Golus means. Exile means, when you're in exile, what does it mean? When a person is in exile, they can't do what they want to do. In fact, they're often forced to do work for the enemy against their own will. That's what Golus is. What does it mean Jews are in Golus? It's not just geographical. It's emotional, it's spiritual. Even in Eretz Yisrael, they say, Mipnei chata'enu galinu me'artzeinu in Musaf of Yom Tov. Why? You're not geographically exiled, you're existentially exiled. Exiled means when you don't know who you are, and you're living a life that is alien to your true self, maybe serving your enemy, using your talents, resources, and koiches to serve that which is against you. That's very, very sad. It's exhausting, yeah. Mamash, a person is in prison or in exile. They're working hard from 6, a whole day they're working. But all their work is not to express themselves with their true desires or yearnings or dreams. It's to work for their enemy and maybe to work for things that are completely against their own agenda, their own perspective. What happens? The person is stripped of his dignity. The person is stripped of his chiyus, of his energy. So Golus HaShechina means the Shechina is giving chiyus to the Rasha, because without the Shechina it can't live, and that energy is being used against it. That's a state of exile. So a person in a state of exile means you're in a place, you're doing stuff, your talents are being expressed, but the purpose is completely not what you really want.
He says Mufrachas.
Yeah.
The Shechina is forced to give things
Yeah.
to the Shah. It's an interesting lashon.
Yeah. In other words, obviously, once the system is chosen, Shemuchrachas lahachis gamar rishayim, kacha neshama muchrachas lahachis es haguf. The neshama is compelled to give life to the body. The chol kavanosa eina b'shvil atzmi. So the whole objective of this Yeridus HaNeshama is not for the soul itself. The soul's dveikus was much higher before. Rak b'shvil lahalas haguf me'afa. The whole purpose of the neshama coming into the body is actually to work with the guf, to elevate it from earth. V'tzarech levadadei, one has to refine his body, kekesev b'yad hatzoref. You have to treat it like silver in the hand of the silversmith. You ever saw a silversmith in action? He takes the silver with delicacy and he refines it. But it's based on one conviction, that this is a piece of silver, and even if there's a lot of filth and dirt and sediments, what is it called? What's mixed into silver? There's a word, no, the psoilus in the silver.
Residue.
I guess the impurities are there. As he places the silver, the metal in the fire, it will be refined. V'chol ma sheyesh taruvis yoser. The more the sediments, the impurities are mixed into the silver, tzarich levarer ulelabein belav eish hayoser gadol. One must refine and lelabein. Libun means clean it out with a greater flame, with a more intense, ferocious flame. Why? Because there's more impurity. Less impurity, you don't need such heat, you don't need such intense warmth to refine the silver. More psoilus, you need a greater fire. The same is true, the guf is silver, but it's mixed in with the Yetzer Hara. And you have to be mevarer the guf from the Yetzer Hara. That's a mixture that is very deep. And bring the guf back to its source. Back to the metaphor of the prince, of the king, of the prince with the zoina, with the harlot. When the melech hires the zoina to entice his son, and at the surface she is all negative. When he goes deeper, he sees that her shayrish is really the melech. He sent her. He sent her to the boy. He sent her to the prince. In other words, what seems like complete ra is really just a cover-up. It's really just eclipsing its true shayrish. Her real mahus is that she's an eved of the melech. And therefore what she really wants is he should say no to her. That is how he fulfills her desire, much more than if he says yeah, but she can't tell this to him. This is the story of the guf. The guf at the surface, like all physicality, it seems like it's a stira to the neshama. It undermines the soul. But the emes is that if you take it back to its shayrish, ein adinim nimtakim ela b'sharsha, it's really pure toiv. It's really pure godliness. It's not looking for anything else, even though at the surface it's so alien from the soul. V'chol ma sheyesh taruvis Rabbi Yoser, the more mixture of ra tzarich lahafrid ayidei eish yoser gadol v'chazek b'tfilah l'dabek b'kayna. You need a more intense fire in davening in order to have the dveikus of the neshama and the guf and its creator. This is the dveikus of tefillah in our world. It's not the dveikus like the neshama has before it's born or after it dies. Over there, there's a soul without a body. Here, it's this hapchem eriru l'miska. Here, the dveikus is to take the dinim back to the shayrish. This is a serious avodah. To be able to look at a reality and say, I see you for who you really are. I see you for your true depth. To be able to see all ra for what it truly is based on its shayrish. The crisis is an opportunity. The breakdown as an opportunity for rebirth. And the same is true, the very struggle that the neshama has with the guf. To be able to see that if you take the guf back to its source, back to its shayrish, it's completely not evil. It's completely not ra at all. It's really a divine energy that is manifested in the guf, even though it doesn't express itself that way. So on one hand you say, the guf is always enticing the neshama to do the wrong thing. Absolutely not. Sometimes it looks like the guf is enticing the neshama to do the wrong thing. But really the guf is your greatest ally. Just like the Zaina really wants the Ben Melech to say no. And when he says no, she celebrates. So you have an interesting situation with the body. The body sometimes tells you to do something that you think the body really wants you to do. But when you do it, the body is disappointed. The body actually is upset. You betrayed the body. When you say no to the body, you said yes to the body. Just like when he said no to the Zoina, he gets more of her than if he says yes. When he says no, he's really capturing her essence. He actually has her. Because she's an Eved of the Melech. When he says yes to her, she doesn't have her. Sometimes when you say yes to the body, you're betraying it. You're neglecting it. The body is like begging you. It has this twinkle in its eye and it says, please, please, don't take me so seriously. I'm just here to bring out your true self. By taking me seriously, you're actually rejecting me, you're betraying me. That's the avodah, and sometimes you need a huge fire in order to refine the silver from the impurities and bring out the cleanliness of the silver, and that's the cleanliness of the body, the beauty of the body, to be able to create a holistic life. So this is a very interesting idea. You're following the temptation of the guf, and you're really being disloyal to it. You don't get it. You're falling prey to superficiality. It's not what it really is. V'lachein, bebayis rishon lo haya hara harbe. Shelo haya hara in the first Beis Hamikdash, where the ra was not so excessive. What do we mean? There was plenty of ra, but the mixtures weren't so bad. Yeah, tzaddikim, you had rishayim. The mixture wasn't so bad. The problem we have is the taruvas, the mixture, the deception. The zoina looks like a zoina. They b'chal didn't have tefillah then. Everybody davened on their own. You could daven for a minute. There was no nusach of tefillah. There was no need for tefillah with fire. Kim kol ma'aseyim haya lahavi harav adinim ala sharsham aydei hakarbonis haya dai. The main avodas Hashem in the first Beis Hamikdash was karbonis. All their action was to bring back the dinim, the ra, all negativity back to its shirish. How did they do it? Through karbonis. Essentially, that's avodas hakarbonis. What is a carbon? You take the beast and you offer it up to Hashem. It becomes a reich nechayach la Hashem. In the flames of the mizbeach, they sublimated the entire universe and they lined the outer with the inner. All the dinim, all the ra came back to its shirish. It came back to its source. That was the whole avodah of karbonis. They didn't need tefillah b'islavos. That's essentially what a carbon is. Like we learned in the Maimon, Vayikra Adam ki yakriv mikem karbon Hashem min abehema. It's not only a physical carbon. It represents the whole avodah of aligning the dinim with the shirish. That's what a carbon is. A carbon means bringing back everything to its true source, to its true origin. Aval b'bayis sheni his chilul l'saken atfilah. In Bayis Sheni, they started to be misaken the tefillah that we have. Shmein Esra, but v'hoisek tzara l'fiyera, v'hoisek tzara, but it was much shorter. First of all, there was a concept of tefillah tzara havinenu, and also the davening itself was short. L'fiyera chitztarchus ha'eish v'tarubas ha'rashaya b'kirba. It's commensurate with how much fire they needed, based on how much the negativity, the brokenness was mixed into them. Remember, the more there's impurity in the silver, the greater the fire. V'anachnu, and we, the Baal HaTanya says, now he's speaking about us, v'anachnu, and we, tzrichim l'spalel yosef v'yosef b'islavos moed. We need to daven more and more with tremendous fire, with tremendous islavos. V'chein b'chol dor v'dor l'mata. Every generation, as you go downward, further, tzarich l'spalel b'islavos g'doila, needs to daven with tremendous lav. Lav is a flam fire with passion. Not because achshadari, an expression in Gemara and Yavam, is because the doir is more kosher. Adirabba, on the contrary, because of the brokenness that gets mixed in and increased in every generation, you need to separate it through a tremendous, ferocious, strong fire in davening, to do a boirer, to refine the toy from the ra, to bring the ra back to its source, like the metaphor of the Ben HaMelech with the Zoyna, sheyachshav. What is the avodah of davening? To think. The oxygen of all your ra that's giving life to it. How does it have life from Hashem? Without Hashem, it couldn't live. Nothing lives without vitality, without energy, without oxygen. Everything in your life has divine energy. Hashem is giving it life. That means everything has a divine core. There's nothing outside of the divine. So now you're experiencing your guf, you're experiencing taivas, you're experiencing machshavas zaris, you're experiencing all types of inclinations and addictions and issues and stuff. You could look at it superficially. and describe it as evil, as bad, as destructive. But then ask yourself one question. There's no thought, there's no emotion, there's no inclination, there's no craving that is not living from something. Something is feeding it in order to be. A fire burns because there's oxygen. A thought continues because it's being fed. As we spoke earlier, Shiurim, every thought you have is being fed. Just doesn't exist. Just like a body survives because you feed it, thoughts survive because you feed it. What is the information that is being fed into you? You'll always see every emotion is being fed. It's hard to live this way. It's very introspective to ask, what is it that's feeding my emotion? I'm angry. I hate this person. Whoa. You don't hate this person. You're experiencing something. You're experiencing something. This person, we never respond to another person's behavior. We tell ourselves we respond to people's behavior. We respond to our interpretation about their behavior. You with me? Our experience of their behavior. Varaya, you could tell me one thing, right? Say the same thing to somebody else. Our emotional reactions are completely different. The behavior is the same. We don't respond to behavior. We respond to our interpretation of behavior. Here he goes again. That's interpretation. Here she goes again. 20 years I'm dealing with this. Interpretation. You gave an interpretation of your wife's behavior 20 years ago, and 20 years later you're still on the same taisvus. You're still on the same taisvus. You didn't bud. Zelbe taisvus, right? You know those yeshivas? They don't move. 20 years later, I once heard from the Pinchas Hirschbrun. I told you the word. Why Yaakov sent Yehuda to make a yeshiva, not Yosef. Because Yosef sent back the Agolas. Rashi says he gave him a simon that he still remembers the Shir Negla Arufa. So he says 22 years later at Haltnach the Zelbes Sugya. Daf machen anaya yeshiva. The second Leibais Talmud. Yeah, the Zelbes Sugya 22 years later. We don't respond to the experience. We don't respond to the reality. We respond to our experience of the reality. The experience of the reality is interpretation. What are you experiencing? That doesn't have to do with what she did or said or what you said. It's your experience of it. What is it in you? What is it in you that you say, oh my God, I can't deal with it anymore. I'm out. I need oxygen. There's oxygen that's feeding the thought that you need oxygen. Now it's not an easy way to live because you have to be very open to these things. Not many people, we're not always open to this. But this is true in everything. True every stress that you're experiencing, all anxiety, all suffering. Pain is a reality, suffering is a choice. Pain is a reality, suffering is our interpretation of it. That's a whole different experience. It's our experience of it. The experience of something, you have to ask, what is feeding it? There's information that is being fed that's ultimately creating this type of experience. You typhus what I'm saying, everybody, or not? Huh? Everybody's typhus here? Really? Okay.
Intellectually or emotionally?
My experience, I'm
So now we have to, if you go deeper and deeper and deeper, the first thoughts that gave rise to it, is ultimately the divine thought. Everything ultimately is getting its chiyus from Hashem. Everything. So that means that everything ultimately has a divine core. Everything. Now that could look very different than what it looks here, but if you could trace it back, there's something divine that's feeding it. Ultimately something divine that's feeding it. That doesn't mean I have to embrace it as is, but it means I could let it be as long as I don't fall prey to what it appears. Because if I could take it back to its shaydish, I could be megala that what looks like Ra really has a core that's toiv. Doesn't mean it doesn't come down as Ra. Back to the Zoyna with the Ben Melech. But for this you have to take it all the way back to the shaydish and say this is ultimately getting chiyus from Hashem. That means there's a divine energy, a divine perspective. For this, you need a big fire. And the more you have these experiences, the bigger the fire, the deeper the fire, in order to be able to take the silver and refine it and bring it back to its shayrish. So he says that's why in Jewish history, tefillah goes through an evolution. Vayaas Rishon has one type of tefillah. Moshe Rabbeinu also davens. He davens for Miriam. Kael Norafan Allah. Boom. Gedaven. Vayaas Rishon there's no davening. Vayaas Sheni there's davening but much less. And afterwards there's more davening, and in each day. So we are used to more text. He's saying it's not about more text. It's about more fire.
So why don't we refine the davening?
Huh?
Why don't we redo the davening according to our standards today?
We never leave
You want more?
No,
Short and good.
More short and fire.
This is that davening is really a moment of very deep fire, deepest lavos. What is it? It's a person realigning themselves with their true selves. It's a person going into themselves, into their guf, identifying the shayrish of every nekuda, and when they identify the shayrish in each nekuda, then there's complete vekus. Then the neshama and the guf are not enemies anymore. Fakert.
And most of our Shmon Esrei is centered around our gufli struggle.
Yes. Yeah.
Any connection to you based Thomas?
This is
What are you?
I'm bringing tonight.
What are you asking?
No. That concept.
Wants to apply to the
I'm saying welche nekuda.
Opening opportunities.
Okay, once I should say. Everybody knows what Yud Beis Tammuz is, or Lav Dafka? Huh? Today is Yud Beis Tammuz. Yud Beis Tammuz is the Chag HaGeula of the Rebbe Rayatz. It was the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi YY Jacobson. It's an incredible story. Russian Jewry had most Jews in it, 5 or 6 million Jews in Russia. Jews in Russia suffered terribly. But what they suffered under the Tsar was nothing close to what happened when the communists took over. In 1917, 100 years ago, was the Bolshevik Revolution. A few years later, the Red Army took over. You had Lenin, Trotsky, Stalin. A whole new era descended on Russia. It became a living hell. 1924, Lenin died and Stalin took over. Trotsky was Jewish. Stalin was a Georgian mass murderer. He killed 50 million people in the next 30 years. From 24 till his death, Purim 1953. Most Jews, from Jews, either they ran from Russia, people like the Chafetz Chaim, Rosh Yeshivas, Rebbe's, and Moshe Feinstein. It was impossible. There's nothing you could do. They closed everything. One man remained there and became literally the captain of Russian Jewry, and that was the 6th Lubavitcher Rebbe. He founded 600 underground yeshivas. 600 underground yeshivas. And all the money of the joint came to him. Because he was like the sole rabbi who represented everything. And he would distribute to everybody. At the Navardika yeshivas, a few Litvish yeshivas that remained, Chassidisha, Chabad, etc. $7 million went through him. And he ran the whole place. It was all underground. It was an underground network. This is the 1920s. Finally, they arrested him. They sentenced him to death, to be shot. And then they converted it to 10 years in exile. And he was sent out of prison, Gimel Tammuz, to go to exile, 1927. 10 days later, Yud Beis Tammuz, Yud Gimel Tammuz, they freed him. For Russian Jewry at that time, this was a watershed moment, that he could come out alive from the lion's den. And the underground network of the Lubavitcher Rebbe of 1927 remained intact till the fall of communism. Under his leadership and then the Rebbe's leadership. And then they went back and they rebuilt. What happened in Russia after that is another miracle. So it was a huge Yom Tov at the time, and it's still celebrated. This is Yud Beis Yud Gimel Tammuz. It happens to be this year is 90 years, right?
Yes.
was a big nest what happened then, and it was a special moment. I'll just tell you one verse that connects to this. When he was taken to prison, it was Tesvav Sivan Tafresh Pezai, 1927. You remember they shot everybody. Stalin killed everybody. Millions and millions of people. So he writes this in a diary of his. He was being investigated. So one of the investigators, they would keep you up nights and torture. They tortured him also, like on Samaisa. He asked him at some point, he says, do you know where you are? Because he was, he wrote that when he came to prison, he decided that he's not going to surrender his dignity. So he remained very strong. They asked him, do you know where you are? So he said, I know where I am. I'm in a place that's potter from a mezuzah, just like a besakise and a shtal, a bathroom and an animal stable. I'm in a place that's potter from a mezuzah. That's what he answered. These were all Jews who went to Cheder. They were bitter communists. Bitter communists. That's what he said. A place that's potter from a mezuzah. So the Rebbe once asked, why did he have to say that? He could have just said, I know where I am, I'm in prison. So he's going to start teaching them Hilchas Mezuzah, that a prison is potter from a mezuzah. So he said he wanted to say something to them. He wanted to say, I'm still in God's world. Don't think that this is not God's world. Halacha applies here also. This is a place that's potter from mezuzah. That's also a din in Shulchan Aruch. Every place has dinim of Shulchan Aruch. This is a place that's chayev and mezuzah. Here there's also halacha. The halacha is that it's potter from mezuzah, but it's a halacha. There's a din that's chal on this place. If there's a din that's chal on this place, it means it's also under the jurisdiction of Hashem. Or besigna nacher, on a more spiritual level, he wanted the shmira of a mezuzah by explaining the dinim of mezuzah here. It's a din in mezuzah that here there's no mezuzah, to get that a little bit of that shmira. So the person took out a gun, and he said, if you don't answer questions, this little toy has made many people talk. It will make you talk also. And he pointed a gun to him. So he said that this toy could only make certain people talk. And that is people who have one world and many gods. But since I have one God and many worlds, so therefore, this toy won't make me talk. That's what he said. A couple of them said this was the day of his liberation. Rabbi Vayaas Moshe, Rabbi YY Jacobson, Yud Beis Tammuz. Tonight there'll be a farbrengen here.
What time?
9 o'clock. In Shul.
The 10th.
I don't think in the tent. I think in Shul. One of them. Nicht as I lined up, but it's an abyss. Okay, have a wonderful day.
This class is brought to you by theyeshiva.net. Please help us continue the classes. Make even a small contribution at www.theyeshiva.net/donate.